Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sharon Florentine. Welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar, Accelerate Threat Detection on AWS Cloud and Containers. We have an awesome webinar today, including a demo, but before we get started, I need to go through a few housekeeping items with you. Just a reminder that today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. We'll be sending an email with instructions for how to access the webinar on demand, or you can visit us at securityboulevard.com/webinars, and it should be there for you as well. At any time during the presentation, you can submit questions using the Q&A tab on your console. So go ahead and send those questions in whenever they come to you, and we'll try and get to as many as possible at the end. We are also doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stick around to the end and see if you are a winner. All right, well, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce to you Pavan Shankar, who is the Director of Security Product Marketing at Systick, and Claudine Morales, Partner Solutions Architect at AWS. I'm going to turn off my camera and put myself on mute and let you guys get right into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. This is going to be an interesting session and hope you'll enjoy it. So as mentioned, today we'll talk about how you can accelerate threat detection on AWS Cloud and Containers. And I'm really excited to be here with Claudine today to talk to you guys about this. So welcome, Claudine, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And on the agenda today, we have several really interesting items to talk about. So to kick us off, Claudine will actually help us understand the AWS security landscape. What are the current services available and how you can use some of the native tools to manage your security posture. And then we'll talk a little bit about the approach of unifying your cloud and container security strategy. If you are running containers and you are in AWS, what are the steps you can take to unify that? And then talk about continuous cloud security posture management to really check your configurations as well as detect suspicious activity in your AWS cloud. And then, as promised, we'll jump into the demo and see this in action and how you can actually get full visibility into threats across your AWS environments. And then step back and cover what Systick Secure does for AWS overall, and then open it up for any questions that you may have during this presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Claudine, who's going to lead us into what security is all about for AWS.
Thank you, Pavan. Yeah, I'd start by saying that security is top priority for us here at AWS. We have processes in place to ensure that we secure resources at different layers. We're talking from the physical security of our data centers down to the internal processes that we have implemented to empower everyone who works for Amazon to uphold our security standards every day. We have over a decade of experience supporting millions of active users per month. And I'm talking about customers from all over the world, businesses of all sizes running every imaginable use case. And we've been able to build security best practices and operational processes that have been validated by security auditors around the world and have achieved compliance with many certification and accreditation programs. Let's go over to the next slide. These practices that we have built are really designed to respond to the requirements of our most demanding, most security sensitive customers. And if you are an AWS customer, you benefit from this because you simply inherit all of these practices, no matter how big your business grows on AWS. We offer services that help you with your risk reduction objectives. I'm going to be highlighting some of these services and features later on. But in addition to AWS native offerings, we also have the largest community of security partners to help you meet your security and compliance goals in the cloud. And the next slide shows just a small fraction of the compliance and assurance programs that AWS has achieved. There are plenty more, and you can see all of them in the AWS compliance page, which I'll provide you a link for later on. But we manage these programs in our infrastructure so that we can help you more easily meet your compliance requirements. That said, AWS alone cannot achieve all of your security requirements on its own. Security is very much a shared responsibility. AWS does control and manage certain components, but you as a customer, you have to do your part in order to protect your AWS environment as well. The AWS Shared Responsibility model that you see here defines who is responsible for securing which components. The orange part at the bottom, that's what AWS has access to. That's what AWS controls and manages. This is what we refer to as security of the cloud. AWS is responsible for securing the infrastructure that runs all of the services offered in the AWS cloud. So all the hardware, the software, the networking components, and the facilities where AWS services run, AWS takes care of that for you. The top part, the blue layers, that's what we refer to as security in the cloud. That's what you as a customer are responsible for. And the scope of your responsibility really depends on the AWS services that you consume. The amount of configuration work will be different for infrastructure as a service offerings like Amazon Virtual Private Cloud or VPC, as well as Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud or Amazon EC2. So for services like these, you will have to set more security configuration. So for example, for an EC2 instance, you will have to take responsibility for managing the guest OS, including all updates and security patches. Any application that you install, firewall configurations are going to have to also configure those, of course, with the use of security groups. For abstracted services, however, we're talking services like Amazon S3 and Amazon DynamoDB, for example. AWS manages the infrastructure layer, the OS, and the platforms for these services, but you will still have to secure the data that you're storing in these services. You have the flexibility to use any AWS service to secure your resources. You're also, of course, free to use solutions offered by our partners like systick, as you see here. Next slide. So the shared responsibility model gives you the flexibility that you need to deploy applications with your desired configurations while being able to rely on AWS to do the heavy lifting in many areas. And you can leverage the many security services, features, and compliance programs that we've built so that you can really focus on what differentiates your organization. And if you do your part to secure AWS environment in combination with the practices that we have built around security, what you're really getting are systems that are more secure and compliant than a single entity could normally achieve on its own. There are different strategies for achieving an optimal security posture. There's prevention, which entails defining controls in order to prevent unauthorized access. There's detection, which requires visibility into your organization's security posture at all times. There's response, which is your ability to respond and recover from security incidents. And then there's remediation, which involves fixing issues in order to secure your environment. As you can see, AWS offers many services, and we can switch over to the next slide. We offer many services to help you with all of these approaches. I'm not going to have the time to go through all of them, but in keeping with our focus for today, I'm going to highlight just a few key services in the second column. But before I do that, next slide. What questions should you be asking when planning for visibility and detection? You really want to know what resources you have running in your environment at any given time. If there are any resources that are getting provisioned that don't seem like they should be there, you really want to know about those. How are these resources configured? Do you maybe have overly permissive access controls? You want to be able to figure that out at all times. You should also be asking what your resources are doing at any given time. If you have an EC2 instance that's acting like it's being used to perform a denial of service attack, you should be aware of that. Who is accessing these resources? What are they doing to your resources? When and from where are they taking these actions from? This is all critical for you to analyze your security posture and troubleshoot security incidents as they arise. The first service that I'd like to highlight is AWS CloudTrail. It logs API calls that are made to your AWS resources. These calls may come from the AWS Management Console, AWS SDKs, command line tools, and other services. It logs both management events or control plane operations, as well as data events or data plane operations. And the level of logging that you should enable depends on your needs and the types of data that you are storing. Enabling CloudTrail is definitely a fundamental AWS best practice. You really have to be able to audit what actions are being taken on your AWS resources and by whom, when, and from where at all times in order to achieve continuous security on AWS. One way to augment, let's talk about CloudTrail best practices. Yeah, let's go to that slide, Pavan. Yeah, so if you're an AWS partner, you may be familiar with the concept of an AWS foundational technical review, which AWS partners have to undergo in order to qualify for certain programs within the AWS partner network. The FTR explicitly requires these CloudTrail best practices. Enabling multi-region trails for all of your AWS accounts is really important, even if you're only running in one region. And why that's the case is because if you really intend to only have resources in certain regions, you absolutely have to make sure that no resources are getting spun up in regions that you're not supposed to be using. It's also a fundamental best practice to send your CloudTrail logs to a separate administrative domain. This could be an AWS account that's separate from your primary account, or it could be an equivalent AWS partner solution. Your logs should be protected from accidental deletion or overwrite. You should enable log file integrity validation as well. And what that does is it ensures that a log file is not tampered with after it is delivered by CloudTrail. It is particularly important during security and forensic investigations. So next thing we talk about is CloudWatch. So one way to augment visibility through CloudTrail is really by sending your logs to Amazon CloudWatch. CloudWatch gives you observability of your AWS and on-prem resources in a single unified view. You can send your CloudTrail log events to CloudWatch logs, and then you can define metric filters in CloudWatch logs to evaluate your CloudTrail log events. So for example, you can have CloudWatch logs monitor for console login events. So you can set CloudWatch alarms, which are going to trigger if a specific threshold is hit for a metric, and you can choose to get notified every time an alarm gets triggered so that you can take action right away. Next up on here is AWS Config, which lets you monitor and assess your AWS resource configurations. What Config does is it records and keeps a history of your resource configuration settings. That allows you to have a trail of changes that have occurred. You can use config rules, which represent your ideal configuration settings for your resources. Config then continuously assesses your settings against these rules and then flags resources that are not compliant. For added visibility, you can set up notifications through Amazon Simple Notification Service or SNS, so you are immediately alerted about non-compliant resources. Next, there's AWS Systems Manager, which gives you visibility and control over your AWS infrastructure, also from one single unified interface. It lets you manage operational tasks across your AWS environment at scale without logging into your instances. So for example, you can scan your instances for compliance to security patch and configuration baselines that you have defined, and then apply updates to them remotely. And that's just one feature. There are many more that Systems Manager offers. Next up here, and I know I'm breezing through this in the interest of time, but there's also GuardDuty. GuardDuty uses up-to-date intelligence feeds with machine learning to help you detect unusual activity in your AWS network and account behavior. So these activities could be things like credential compromises, unauthorized data access, communication with known command and control servers, or API calls from malicious IPs. Finally, there is Security Hub, which aggregates your security alerts and findings in a comprehensive view so that you don't have to switch between the many security tools that you are using for insight. Security Hub pulls findings from services like GuardDuty, Systems Manager, and several other AWS services, as well as AWS partner solutions like Pavan, I know systick cloud connector findings, you can send those to Security Hub as well. So that's great. You can also send Cloud Custodian findings to Security Hub. And I have a slide for this. Over to the next one. I have a slide for this because Cloud Custodian is a popular open source rules engine that allows you to secure and optimize costs for over 100 AWS resource types. And it used to be that Cloud Custodian findings were sent via email notifications and command line outputs, but with this integration with the Security Hub, you can now view Cloud Custodian findings through your Security Hub console. And I want to share just some resources that you can check out to learn more about our offerings. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Pavan.
Thank you so much, Claudine. That was fantastic overview of the different cloud services as well as security services that AWS provides. Now let's shift gears and talk a bit about how you can unify your AWS cloud and container security strategy. And as we step back and think about how your applications are running in AWS today, typically you're probably running your applications on EC2 instances, containers, Kubernetes, ECS, EKS versions, or even serverless functions or serverless frameworks like Fargate. And what's happening is that this compute layer at the heart of your application is constantly interacting with several other cloud services like S3 buckets, RDS databases, networking services, load balancers, management services. So it's really important for cloud teams and DevOps teams that are running these applications on AWS to think about unifying their approach and managing the risk across both the containers as well as the cloud infrastructure that it's running on. So what are the risks as we think about this cloud stack? And as you're running in AWS, on the workload side, things to watch out for would be vulnerabilities in your containers that could potentially expose your application to breaches. So these could be OS or non-OS vulnerabilities, and making sure that you're scanning for them is important. Threats at runtime is also important because if something malicious does occur, you want to be able to detect an alert on that, as well as have an audit trail in case something does occur and that container is long gone. On the infrastructure side, when I talk to customers, the first thing that they want to understand is what are the cloud assets that are running currently in my environment. Just discovering those assets is an important step. And then identifying, are there any misconfigurations tied to them? Is there any risky behavior or suspicious activity happening across my different accounts? And this is where things like CloudTrail that Claudine was mentioning is a great source of truth. And we'll talk more about how we extend that in the secure platform. And then on the compliance side, being able to manage compliance continuously across both the workloads and infrastructure is important because oftentimes it's the step to check off so that your apps can run in production. And it's a important mandate to meet. And oftentimes, customers today have different tools to solve these problems. And what happens is that the siloed approach doesn't work because these tools have different pieces of the puzzle, and it takes manual effort to stitch them all together and bring it together in a single timeline to see the threats, right? So what you really need to be thinking about is how do you unify your threat detection and response and bring these events, security events across cloud and containers in a single console. So on the cloud side, being able to detect that suspicious activity, those configuration mistakes, whether you're extending Cloud Custodian capabilities of catching misconfigurations or configuration drift, and then leveraging CloudTrail to detect the real-time anomalous behavior that's happening in your environment. And then on the workload side, looking at being able to detect threats, again, on the containers and Kubernetes environments, leveraging data sources like syscalls that allows you to get that real-time visibility into the actual workload behavior, and also Kubernetes API audit logs that tell you that tells you kind of who did what in Kubernetes, and having that data source is also important to be able to detect threats. And then bringing these together, the benefits again are you have deep visibility that's consolidated across both these environments, so you can see things like lateral movement potentially that might be occurring from a vulnerable container that's exploited to get access into your cloud environments, right? And being able to catch that entire or detect the entire attack chain and catch that threat is important and is only possible if you have that visibility across both. And then unified event store is another key thing that I always hear from customers, which is that they want to go to a single place to query and understand what's happening in their cloud environments, and then have have all the context from the cloud and the workloads in one place that they can use to define precise policies. And then on the policy side, having a common policy language and a single interface that allows you to detect threats across these environments. So oftentimes the problem is that with separate tools, you have different learning paths of learning different languages to create these policies, and it just takes time. So ultimately, having that single interface and having that deep visibility and a single event store reduces the time it takes for you to detect these threats across your AWS cloud and the containers running on top. So as we think about each of these steps, we'll dive into more details. So on the cloud security side, starting with CSPM. So this is often a very common use case that customers are looking to meet when they're first starting off their cloud security journey, and also overall managing their cloud security posture. So it starts with static checks, right? Which is really all about, what are the assets that are running in AWS, and are there any misconfigurations or compliance violations that it has? S3 buckets that are exposed, IAM user roles that are elevated, or MFA not turned on. These types of foundational best practices are, if they're violated, you want to be able to detect on that. And AWS has fantastic, benchmarks for these. The AWS Foundations benchmarks is a great example of what you can use to detect these misconfigurations in the first place. But it doesn't stop just there. You also want to be able to detect threats if when they do occur in your environment, in your cloud. And the reason for this is just a static tool isn't enough, because an attacker could potentially come in via a misconfiguration and then quickly revert that configuration back, so that the periodic static tool that checks the configuration doesn't catch that drift, right? But then the malicious activity that happens in the cloud is usually getting logged in something like CloudTrail. So if you have CloudTrail turned on in multi-regions, it's a great way for you to get that source of data to know, okay, if this user logged in, did they go, touch a sensitive file in a S3 bucket, for example? What did they do, right? So being able to analyze that allows you to have continuous cloud security posture management and compliance. And what do we use for these? So Claudine mentioned Cloud Custodian is a great open source project that AWS has a strong partnership with. And that's also what we leverage under the hood here at Systick for our CSPM. So it's an open source based tool that does CSPM. It's also a cloud CNCF project. And that's what we use to help you manage your cloud posture. And the nice thing is that you don't actually have to tweak the Cloud Custodian policies. It's under the hood, but on what the customer experiences is a workflow that's tailored for their cloud security use cases. And then on the threat side, actually detecting real-time threats, that's based on Falco. Now, Falco is something that Systick created and contributed to the open source community. It's gained a lot of momentum. It's become the runtime security standard for containers and Kubernetes, but we're also extending the Falco capabilities to detect threats in the cloud. So this allows you to have that security posture that's imperative as you manage the security risk in AWS. So a little bit more about how our CSPM module works. One of the benefits for the customers is that it's really simple to get started. It's a single-click installation with the CloudFormation template, and then that processes the configuration data within your account, where the Cloud Custodian is in fact doing this analysis, and then sends those events back to Systick, where it's then analyzed against our compliance services. And in this example, we're using CIS benchmarks for AWS that detects, is an S3 bucket exposed, is a security group public, is an ELB, have the wrong permissions, for example. So all these different checks we can catch early on in the cycle. And then on the threat side, being able to integrate natively with the CloudTrail logs is important. So, as Claudine mentioned, if you have CloudTrail running across all these different regions, it's a great way to capture all of that activity, because it's recording all those API calls, whether it's management console, SDKs, CLI, right? It's recording those calls, and then Systick is able to ingest those CloudTrail logs and allow you to write Falco-based the open source Falcon-based rules against these logs to detect actual malicious activity. And those events can be, again, forwarded to Security Hub, forwarded to CloudWatch. So the native services that AWS has, we're basically providing a better together experience there, and then allowing you to also see all these violations and events and set policies in the platform itself. Now talking about an example of a customer that's actually leveraged the CloudTrail-based detection, and this is a financial services company, and actually their CSERT and cloud security teams were really involved in this deal and drove this to completion, where their challenge was being able to spot that real-time activity. They had used CloudTrail, Cloud Custodian in the past, were fans of it, but also wanted to build on the native AWS services to have that real-time threat detection. So CloudTrail, CloudWatch, at Security Hub for the analysis. And then what we provided was the out-of-the-box threat detection rules that were based on CloudTrail, but also Falco-based policies that were matched against all of these different CloudTrail logs, right? CloudTrail logs specifically for various services like EC2, S3, IAM, RDS, all these different rules services had, we created out-of-the-box policies based on Falco that could ingest these CloudTrail logs and allow them to have better threat detection in their AWS environments. And one of the two really big reasons why they liked this, one was it avoided any sort of vendor lock-in because it was open source based. They knew that they could go to the Falco GitHub and understand how these rules were created and those alerts were generated, and didn't have to rely on a proprietary vendor. And if they moved away from systick, they still had the investment in the Falco capabilities, and they knew that there was a community there. And then the second one was we mapped all these to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So their CSERT team, as I mentioned, was able to understand the severity of these policies, understand what these violations meant, because we spoke their language, right? We were able to speak the SOC and CSERT team's language and defining these different policies based on the MITRE framework. So as we think about what Systick Secure provides for our customers in AWS, it's really the unified container and cloud security approach. So on the containers and Kubernetes side, the use cases that we offer there, image scanning, right? So both pre-deployment and at runtime scanning your container images, runtime security. So this is detecting threats across your containers, Kubernetes, and then incident response and forensics. So if something does occur, we provide a unique capability to give you full, deep audit trails of exactly what went wrong, commands that were run, files that were touched, all of that details, even after that container is gone. We also have a monitoring capability, so being able to monitor your containers and Kubernetes with out-of-the-box dashboards. If you're using Prometheus or you have PromQL queries, we can extend that as well in the platform. So really focused on the SRE and the ops persona as well to really unify monitoring and security there for your workflows. And on the cloud side, very similar set of use cases, but from a cloud security perspective, it's CSPM, right? Managing the configuration, detecting threats, incident response, and monitoring as well. And then compliance is something that we meet across the board with out-of-the-box policies and reports for standards like PCI, NIST, SOC 2. So really unifying these based on an open source security stack is the approach that we've taken here, building curated workflows on top for the customer. Okay, so now let's jump into the demo, and I will show you this in more details. So as we talked about in the slides, we started off by talking about CSPM and kind of the journey of the customer, starting with managing their configurations, detecting their assets that are misconfigured, and then detecting threats at runtime, and then finally getting that unified picture, right? How do I see all this in one place across cloud and containers? So we'll take the same flow in the demo here, starting with your misconfiguration. So I mentioned AWS Foundations benchmark. So this is the policy that we use to check your configurations, the CIS AWS compliance benchmarks 1.3. And you can see all this analysis, again, is being done by Cloud Custodian here. So this is the static configurations, but you can see that you get a nice report and an easy workflow to manage without having to dig into the Cloud Custodian policies. So you can pick specific accounts in AWS, pick specific regions, and see at a high level what those checks are, what are they passing or failing across different sections of IAM, logging, networking, and so on. You can see your pass-fail percentage. So what are the passing, failing resources, and then drill into the ones that are passing or failing. So MFA is not turned on for the root account. This is an IAM best practice that's being violated. Other ones like these are the MFA. MFA isn't being enabled for all IAM users. You're rotating your your keys, credentials, and then you can also see in the event if something is violated, like credentials are unused. You can see who are the users that are violating this, right? So it's kind of nice to actually see all this data here. And then in the event of a violation, you're actually getting the ability to remediate. So we give you guided remediation because we don't want to do the remediation for you necessarily if you're not comfortable. And the approach here we're taking for now is providing guided remediation steps to help you figure out what you need to do to fix this violation. So that gives you kind of a snapshot of what we can do on the static side with these reports and allowing you to have these CSV reports that you can continuously track and report to your compliance or GRC teams about your static posture. And then on the threat side, let's take a look at what rules do we have on deck for you to detect suspicious activity. So this is the next step, right? Which is where we really start to differentiate, because a lot of tools in the market can do static CSPM, but what makes us unique is all of the out-of-the-box runtime capabilities that we have for your cloud and container environment. So starting in the cloud phase, right, you can see all these different CloudTrail rules that we have. Noticing if someone is adding an AWS user to a group, right? That's not just violating a cloud principle, but also potentially compliance standards like NIST. You could also see, someone authorizing a security group on the ingress or egress. They're violating, MITRE defense evasion, for example, right? Or even things like someone's deleting CloudTrail or creating CloudTrail or disabling logging. Some of those best practices that Claudine mentioned, right? You can actually see if someone's actually violating this in real time, and what else is that violating. So if I just see some of these CloudTrail rules, you can see some of these capabilities per service. And again, if I wanted to see many of these out of the box, I can see what do we have for EC2. So all these different policies out of the box, real-time threat detection for EC2, and many of the other services that we have to offer here for your AWS environments. Fargate is another great example. If you're running on Fargate, right, we can detect based on CloudTrail, looking at things like someone deleted an ECS service or deleted a stopped a task, right? So being able to have all of this deep insights and policies out of the box for you helps you, detect threats faster in your AWS environments. And it's really easy to create a policy. So if I look at the policies here, I can just take an example of many of these out-of-the-box ones. So we have some, capabilities for Fargate, for example, detecting threats inside Fargate, and this is unique to be able to detect suspicious file activity in your Fargate tasks, because it's really hard to get that visibility. We have the ability to do that as well on your Fargate workloads, being able to both detect and respond with detailed audit trails even after that Fargate task is gone. But on the AWS cloud security side, right, being able to have these best practices here, that you have all these out of the box. You can add more rules from the rules library I just showed you, but this allows you to basically, get started with applying these best practices to detect threats across your AWS accounts, navigate suspicious activity or user activity that's anomalous, and all of that. So now we showed you how you can manage your compliance and manage your static posture with the benchmarks with foundations on AWS, as well as looking at some of the rules that we have out of the box, right? So now let's bring this all together and see how can you visualize these threats in a single console, right? And this is where we are, again, really unique in providing some of these capabilities for you, where you can see, over the last 2 weeks, what are the different sets of activities that have happened in my cloud environment. I can see this from multiple lenses. So a cloud activity view gives me all my activity in the cloud. I can also drill into a user level view to understand, what the user has done in my cloud environment. Looks like my demo environment isn't working here as well, but you would basically be able to see your anomalous activity by users as well. Let's see if I can go back more and see if there's any way I can do this. Okay, so this, at least you can see from a Kubernetes specific lens more information about how, what's happened from a Kubernetes angle. So if cluster operator, DevOps team wants to understand the risk based on namespaces, clusters, pods. They can quickly identify that. So the key point here is that from any lens or any perspective, whether it's a user behavior you wanted to understand, whether it's a Kubernetes lens or a cloud view, you can easily understand exactly what's happening in your cloud environments. And here you can see kind of, specifically by an account, a region, a service, and drill down into these services and actually understand, what has happened over the last 2 weeks. If there's any interesting things here in the last 3 days or 3 hours, let's see, in this demo environment. Most of the stuff is just someone deleting log activities, but ideally you would see a ton of other activities. Potentially, if someone is, coming in without MFA, logging in, then trying to get access to a workload or a pod, and potentially mining Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency within that container, right? So you'll be able to see the full trail of activity and actually understand exactly what's happening within your cloud environments. Let me just try one more time if I can see here. It looks like I can't, which might be okay. Okay, so that's kind of a full view of what you're seeing here, across the different lenses. That being said, let's kind of jump into what are some of the other things that we can help you do, which is really around incident response and kind of threat detection and response there. So, all these different events that you're seeing, would show up in your insights view or the events view here. But a common thing that folks want to understand is the activity, like someone spawning a shell in a container. So if I detected this, I can actually go in and see all the activity that surrounded this incident, and you can actually see who logged in into your container running in AWS, what commands did they do, right? What did they touch? All of that detail. So this is a nice way for you to get full audit trails that are great for compliance, right? Proof of compliance, better incident response, and really being able to track a user that, let's say this terminal shell happened by a user that logged into your cloud account, and then did some suspicious activity and then got access, elevated privileges, got access to a pod, and then did this. You are able to see this entire attack chain, right, from start to finish. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we can do around the detection and response, as well as compliance. And then just wanted to quickly also show that we are also able to secure your workloads, especially your containers, early in the cycle. So in the CI/CD pipeline, we can scan for vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and we have really robust policies here out of the box based on Dockerfile best practices, compliance standards that can check many different things like vulnerabilities, OS, non-OS, exposed configurations, secrets being exposed, AWS access keys potentially baked into an image or instruction. So catching all of that, we can help you alert on, and then when it does occur, sorry, it's probably in here. So when it does occur, we can give you a nice scan results to tell you, okay, across your different environments, whether it's CI/CD scanning before you deploy, whether it's in your ECR registry, whether it's at runtime, right, or whether it's other environments like Fargate, and we can scan for images that are tied to Fargate tasks as well. So really being able to see these results all directly here, and then if I pick, let's say an AWS registry, I can see what are the images that are passing or failing in my ECR registry today, and actually if something fails, go in and see what are the summary view, but jump into what are the vulnerabilities in your image that's currently in your ECR, right? Are there any high critical CVEs here? Do they have any fixes? And I can go about rebuilding these images with the right fix, right? It's a really easy way for your developers and your DevOps teams to get a holistic view into their vulnerability management across their containers running anywhere, right? Whether it's CI/CD, registry, inline on the host, on the workload itself at runtime, even things. We also integrate with admission controllers. If you're using admission controllers in Kubernetes, we can embed into that as well via validating webhooks to prevent vulnerabilities from getting into your cluster. So really strong, robust image scanning capabilities there as well. So that concludes my demo. So I'm going to jump in back to the slides here and take us home. So stepping back a bit, what I just covered for you in the demo, if you just as a snapshot here, the key use cases we do cover for AWS environment scanning, right? So first off, just following the workflow and scanning for vulnerabilities in your registry, in your pipelines, native integrations with tools like Jenkins, Code Build, GitLab, right? All of your popular tools. Scanning at runtime, so if new CVs come up, we can detect that, and also map it back to which AWS cloud account, which region, which namespace or workloads they're part of. And then on the CSPM and compliance side, being able to manage your posture, help you validate compliance with the standards like PCI, NIST, right? SOC 2, really giving you that holistic compliance across your cloud configuration, your image scans, your runtime compliance, as well as your audit trails that you need for compliance. So really a full lifecycle compliance there across cloud and containers. And then on the runtime side, again, that's the bread and butter for us, where we've really differentiated and have strong capabilities around runtime threat detection and response, and then incident response on the forensic side, being able to capture all that details even after that container is long gone. And so a bit about how we collect this, how we instrument runtime security for your AWS containers. You can run this on the host. It's either a eBPF probe or a kernel module that hooks into the kernel, gets access to the system calls, and that's how we collect that data. It's not invasive, so we're not touching, there's no sidecar or tampering with the containers that are running on top. We're purely looking at the kernel, and nothing lies with the kernel. So that's really the best, most granular source of data that we're collecting, that's allowing you in turn to have the best threat detection and response in the industry today. And then on the audit log side, I mentioned EKS. If you are running EKS and you are interested in getting detection there from the audit logs, we ingest those logs as well, and then extend these Falco detection capabilities across audit logs to be telling you, did someone store credentials in a config map or execute a pod or elevate privileges? Really, who did what is what we can help you understand as well. And then finally, the detailed audit trails and forensics evidence, helping you respond with more confidence, in your AWS environments. This is, again, very unique. Many other tools just give you a list of processes that are running. We can actually tell you way more details than that. So think about this as sort of Wireshark for your containers, where in the past you had that ability to do that for your network packets. We're doing that actually for your containers. And funny story there is, or interesting story, not funny, but interesting, is that the co-creator of Wireshark, Loris, actually founded Systick, and that's why a lot of the forensics, DNA spills over into the Systick platform and the open source tools there as well. And lastly, here, a great example of incident response using the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This is Goldman Sachs that deploys it on 100,000 plus nodes. And the number one thing that we did for them was give them visibility, and second, being able to map all these rules to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. All these Falco-based rules, actually, I would say, allowed them to have really strong threat detection mechanisms and capabilities, and fast incident response as a result of that. So, just to summarize, Systick is a secure DevOps platform that's built on an open source security stack. So, leveraging the best-in-class open source tools, Falco, which is Falco and Systick open source. So both of them, we've created, and now part of Falco is part of CNCF. That's what's really powering our runtime security under the hood. So all those runtime policies you're seeing for containers in cloud are curated based on the Falco rules from the open source community. And then Systick open source, again, for troubleshooting and incident response. We also bake in Prometheus and extend that for visibility and monitoring for your containers. And then Cloud Custodian that I mentioned earlier for really managing cloud security with an open source approach. So these are the core tools that we use as a stack. That's really what the platform is built around. And the two key products there are Systick Secure, all things security, and Systick Monitor, all things Kubernetes, container, Prometheus monitoring, and really packaging them into one single platform to unify the workflow there, and ultimately helping you run confidently, across containers, Kubernetes, and cloud environments. So if this was informational and you enjoyed this presentation, you want to learn more, a lot of great content available. So we have the AWS and systick security guide that allows you to, that help you can basically read to understand more details about a lot of things we talked about and the use cases that most common AWS customers face and how we can help address that, as well as some of the partner blogs that we have on APN. And then we also have a Cloud Chaos game. If you're looking to have some fun with cloud security, definitely play that game to kind of give you an experience of some of the typical attacks that you could potentially face and what you can do to prevent against them. And then finally, if you're interested in trying Systick, we have many different free trial options. So we have a free forever cloud security free tier, basically, which is free forever up to a single account, and you get to experience some of the cloud security, posture management, and CloudTrail threat detections there. But if you want to expand and see more container security use cases, there's also a 30-day free trial. That's full access to the product, but for 30 days. And you can definitely dig into that one to get a full test drive the product. And we also have a monitoring free trial as well that you can experience for yourself. So definitely go check out systick.com/start-free to experience these for yourself. And that's it. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. Hopefully this was useful. Definitely check out the free trial and we'll open it up for any questions that you may have.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much. All right. We do have a couple minutes here. We can take some questions. So let's see. I'm going to direct this first one right back to you, Pavan. How is my sensitive data protected in the cloud?
Yeah, I can take that one. So a lot of the things we talked about, one of the key themes here is to protect your sensitive data in the cloud.
Are we not? Let me skip over Claudine. I'm going to throw one your way. What's the difference between? Oh, nope, sorry.
Can you hear me okay, or am I coming through? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. So I guess just to answer that question on the sensitive data, processing all of that within your...
I don't think I am hearing him. That is my fault here on my end, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a delay in your audio, maybe, Sharon. So I'll just answer the question and then we can keep going. So on the sensitive data side, being able to
now you
run
are,
that
yes. Can you hear me?
In their account, and basically make sure that we're processing all of that
okay,
without sending those images or the CloudTrail logs outside of your account.
Should I take the next question? I see it over here. Yeah. So somebody asked, what's the difference between CloudTrail management events and data events? And thanks for asking that, because I know I mentioned them earlier, but really didn't define them. So management events are actions that are performed on resources in your AWS account. So for example, if you attach an IAM policy to a role, or if you spin up another subnet inside your VPC, those are management events. They're also called control plane operations. For CloudTrail, you also get non-API events logged as management events. So this includes things like console logins. You're going to see those as being logged as management events. By default, management events are going to be enabled once you enable CloudTrail, as opposed to data events, which are data plane operations. So if you're using services like Amazon S3, Amazon DynamoDB, these are object level API operations. So for S3, those are get object, put object, delete object calls. For DynamoDB, that would be put item, delete item, update item calls. Whenever an AWS Lambda function gets invoked, that's also a data event. These types of events are typically very high volume. So you do not by default enable data events when you enable CloudTrail. Like, you have to actually explicitly enable the logging of data events. Thanks for the question.
Yep, and I can take another one.
Gotcha. All right.
How does Systick manage my cloud
security? Can folks
security?
hear me now?
Yeah, I think we can hear you. There's a little bit of a delay, Sharon. So I'll just take the question here. So how does Systick manage my cloud security posture? So like we talked about, we use Cloud Custodian under the hood. Again, another open source tool, but making it easy by giving you the workflows on top, and that's allowing us to check for misconfigurations and manage your security posture, help you validate compliance. And then the additional step on top of that would be the Falco-based threat detection that we've extended for the cloud as well. So putting those two together, you get both the static and the real time, really giving you that continuous cloud security posture management there. And then there's one more question here for me that I can probably answer. How do I get started with Systick? So definitely go check out. I would say, if this was useful, start the trial and get your hands on the product to see what it can do for you. So the easiest way to do that is just go to the homepage, systick.com, and hover over to the Start Free button, and then you can pick your adventure from there. Great. I don't think there are any more questions.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for bearing with me and my technical issues here. I really appreciate it. All right. Just a reminder that this session was recorded. So if you miss any or all of it, you can go back and watch it again. We'll be sending an email with instructions for how to access the webinar on demand. You can also visit us at securityboulevard.com/webinars. We are going to go ahead now and draw our Amazon gift card winners. And those are, let's see, our first winner is Richard H. Congratulations, Richard. Next, we have David C. Congratulations, David. Stephen R. And Joseph W. Congratulations to all our winners. Thank you so much to the audience for joining us today. Amazon winners, you will be getting an email with instructions for how to claim your gift card. So check your inboxes. And if you do not see them there, check your spam folder. Once again, thank you again for joining us and for bearing with me with my own technical difficulties. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again soon. I'm Sharon Florentine, signing off.